Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, August the 13th, 2024. So I'm going to continue on the theme of American politics. Now, it shouldn't really matter what I'm talking about in terms of astrology and understanding how astrology works. And really, this video is about a particular technique, and I'm going to use it in terms of the example of American politics, but again, that shouldn't matter. So if you find American politics uninteresting, that doesn't mean that the video might not be of any interest to you, because it's a technique that matters. And the technique I'm going to be looking at is phase angle returns. Now, I'm sure that you've heard of solar and lunar returns. So a solar return is when the sun returns to where it was when you were born. Okay, I said I'm sure you've heard of solar returns. I suppose that's if you're new to astrology, or perhaps new to this channel, perhaps you haven't heard of solar returns, but they are an important astrological technique, and the idea is that you look at the solar return to give you some idea about the year ahead. And then if you want to know about the month ahead, you can use a lunar return. So every month the moon returns to where it was when you were born. But what if we want to go even lower? What if we want to know about the day? What about the return there? Maybe you use the ascendant return. Every day the ascendant returns to the place it was when you were born. Every day the midheaven returns to where it was when you were born. However, that's not entirely satisfactory for a number of technical reasons. It's connected with angular planets. You should actually be able to see angularity, planets transiting the angles. This happens, but you don't need to worry too much about that. It might actually be better if you want to look at a daily chart, a chart that tells you something about the day ahead, to look at the phase angle. And what the phase angle means is you can take 2 points at the time of birth, for example, the sun and the moon, or the ascendant and the sun, or the midheaven and the sun, and just see when that exact angular separation repeats. So, for example, Donald Trump has his sun in Gemini and his midheaven in Taurus. So you look at the exact angular separation between the sun and the midheaven, and you see when in the day that exact separation repeats, and you just set up a chart for that. And that might give you an idea about how the day ahead is going to work. Now, in most cases, that would be absurd. I mean, to have a chart every single day is going to be quite exhausting. But if you've got a presidential election, you've got 2 candidates. And each one of those candidates will have a phase angle return. Now, I'm going to use the phase angle return between the sun and the midheaven, not the sun and the ascendant. The reason I'm going for the sun and the midheaven, because the midheaven is more about career and one's ambitions. And I'm going to ask the question, can you compare the phase angle return of 2 candidates and say, well, this candidate has got a better phase angle return, a chart that looks better than the other, and say, well, okay, well, I think this person is going to win the election as a result of that. Now, there's far more to it than just phase angle returns in terms of predicting election results, but I thought I'd give it a go. I'm not just going to look at what's happening this year, but I'm going to look at what's happening in previous elections. And I'm going to also point out something really important about the Venus cycle, and this does link to the Venus cycle and Donald Trump. Okay, so I now want to look at what's happening today from a perspective of the astrology and the I Ching. That's what I want to do before I talk about phase angles. And just a reminder that I would really appreciate it if you were to like this video, to indicate that you like this video, assuming, of course, you did like it. If you didn't like this video, then I suppose you better say that you disliked it. And if you are not subscribed, I would, really, really appreciate it if you were to subscribe. As I always say, it doesn't cost you anything, but it does make a big difference to the channel. Okay, so let's see what's going on today. I've got the picture of a presidential seal top right. I don't know. The reason I've done that is because I wanted to talk about presidential elections, and I want to really focus on the presidential election this year, but I want to look at lots of presidential elections in the past, and not lots, but just a few, just to get an idea about whether the phase angle return technique might work. So that's why I've got the presidential seal up there, but there's no particular reason. I just thought just having loads of pictures of presidents, I don't know, that just seems a bit tedious. I suppose the presidential seal is also tedious, so don't worry too much about that picture. Okay, so let's turn to what's happening today, which is Tuesday, and it is Tuesday, August the 6th. Well, it's actually not Tuesday, August the 6th, 2024. Apologies for that. It is August the 13th, 2024. So let me just fix that. There you go. So that is what's going on today. You can see that the moon is just entering Sagittarius. This is set for noon on August the 13th, 2024 in New York. And this moon in Sagittarius, it happens at 11:01 a.m. London time. The moon enters Sagittarius. And at 6:01 a.m. New York time, it enters Sagittarius, which is 3:01 Los Angeles time. So if you're in the Americas, it's a moon in Sagittarius day. If you're in Western Europe, and at least for the last half of the day, the moon is in this sign, is in Sagittarius. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, East Asia, then I suppose it's a moon in Scorpio day. So it does depend to an extent on your time zone. And just before the moon moves into Sagittarius, the moon makes an opposition to Uranus. And so, at the beginning of the day, there might be a certain amount of tension. Things may not be entirely going to plan. People might be quite obstinate, and we just have to be ourselves. We need to just make a little bit of an effort to think round the situation and to work out the best way forward. And we just don't want to get into a confrontation for the sake of it. Now, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto, and then it makes a square to Mercury. So moon in Sagittarius, sextile Pluto, that might be a feeling that things are happening. We can make things happening. We can make things happen. The moon has moved out of Scorpio. Scorpio can be a little bit introspective, and we're not really ready to take the initiative. We just feel that we've got to work out what's going on. But when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it's a change. And it might feel in many cases like a change for the better. And with moon sextile Pluto, there's just a sense that we can create some kind of gentle transformation. It's a gentle transformation because it's moon sextile Pluto. It's not moon square Pluto, conjunct Pluto, opposition Pluto. And so if we're not entirely happy with the way things are, we can do things to improve the situation, but in such a way that I don't think that we're going to cause much of a fuss. And then the moon makes a square to Mercury. That moon square Mercury could be a little bit difficult. The moon and Mercury are about how we communicate, how we get our message across. And perhaps with moon in Sagittarius, we might be a little bit tactless. That is one manifestation of moon in Sagittarius. Moon in Sagittarius, can be very keen to tell people what's on its mind, and moon in Sagittarius is quite innocent. It just likes to say, "Well, this is the way it is. No intention to offend anyone," but some people don't like honesty, and perhaps with moon in Sagittarius square Mercury in Virgo, there just may be a temptation to be just a little bit too honest. Though, looking at the overall geocentric planetary picture, I would have said that it's another day where there isn't a great deal going on immediately. Though that's only perhaps if we look at the exact aspect. Now, there is an aspect which is exact tomorrow, which is pretty exact today, and that is Mars conjunct Jupiter. Mars and Jupiter are half a degree apart. So they are really, really close now. And I think that we can treat that Mars-Jupiter conjunction as being effectively exact. And, okay, I might not want to emphasize Mars-Jupiter today because I want to emphasize it tomorrow, but really the Mars-Jupiter opposition is there, and it can be quite over the top. It's high energy, that Mars-Jupiter conjunction, and it's in Gemini, so it has a connection with what we say. And of course, now that Moon is in Sagittarius and there's an exact Mars-Jupiter conjunction, people can be tactless. They certainly got a lot to say. They may not be sure quite how they're going to say whatever is on their mind, but they were going to want to say it anyway. And maybe in the first instance, they're not going to be worrying too much about the consequences. So as far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, let's just look at this. So remember, this is the position of the planets with the Sun in the middle, and we've got Mercury trine Jupiter. There it is. There's Mercury at 7 Aquarius, and it's trine Jupiter at 6 Gemini. And we still have this heliocentric grand trine in place. And perhaps this is when the heliocentric grand trine is really going to be hitting its peak, at a time when the geocentric moon has moved into Sagittarius. So Mercury trine Jupiter is fairly, I would have said, fairly optimistic. It's got a lot to say for itself, and we may feel that things really are good. But even if things are fraying at the edges, we might still think that we can make the best of things. That optimism, maybe a bit of wishful thinking. I think there is a lot of wishful thinking around. I've been noticing this as I look around the internet on various subjects. There's a lot of hope. Whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's the markets, there's a lot of hope around. Maybe that hope is justified, but today maybe people just feeling that things are okay, not just the news, but in our everyday lives, things are going to be okay. But this aspect between Mercury and Jupiter, also Venus trine Jupiter, we need to see it in perspective. And I was kind of trying to say this yesterday. We need to see this in perspective. Yes, it is good heliocentrically. I think that might make us feel good about a number of things. But the astrological situation is on the brink of becoming actually quite complicated. We might have we had a bit of a break. We had Mars conjunct Uranus on, when was it, July the 15th, and just this might be a time when we just feel things are okay. But we've got Mars square Saturn later in the week on Friday. We've got this really very difficult full moon on Monday, and I think that things are just not going to stay this good, at least from a heliocentric perspective. And so it may be a case of making hay while the sun shines. If you want to sort something out now, and while people are feeling relatively relaxed, maybe Moon in Sagittarius is going to give everyone a boost. So perhaps one needs to take advantage of it now. And Mercury trine Jupiter is good, as I've said. It's about the world seeing hope and possibilities, and unfortunately Mercury is a fast mover, and it will move on. Okay, so that's the heliocentric picture, and now I want to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So let's just change the coordinate system back to the geocentric picture. Okay, so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, August the 13th, 2024. Aries. You're feeling now, Aries, that things are really starting to happen. It's not just the fact that the moon is moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius, and that is certainly, I think, good news. It's also the fact that we've got a conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. Now, this conjunction between Mars and Jupiter is exact tomorrow, but it's pretty exact today. And Mars is in Gemini. Mars has a special connection with your sign. It's conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of good fortune, and you just feel that I think things have changed, and things have changed for the better, and that you now feel that you are ready to take action. Perhaps we're talking about things that in the past you felt the time wasn't right, or you felt that the circumstances you had to deal with were just complicated, even messy, and you just wanted to put everything on hold for a bit. But now you can see real possibilities, and at the same time you're able to be, I think, more flexible. I mean, you have been in your own way more flexible for some time, for some weeks, because Mars is in Gemini. Mars, your ruler, moving through Gemini allows you to consider several possibilities and to talk about several possibilities. There are a few subjects that are off bounds at the moment for an Aries. You're able to consider many different approaches, but with Mars moving to the conjunction of Jupiter, it just may feel that now's the time, that you've got a lot of energy, you've got a lot of mental energy, and you are absolutely ready. Now, I think you do need a certain amount of caution here, because there is some danger, Aries, that you perhaps take on too much, or you commit yourself to too much, or you just overestimate how much energy you've got. Yeah, you've got a lot of energy, but Aries, you haven't got all the energy in the world. There is a limit to it. So I would suggest that you exercise some discipline. With Mars, with this Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, it's perhaps considering 2 possibilities, not 20 possibilities. That way you'll be able to focus your energy with greater power. And don't go chasing things which may actually be pretty trivial. Decide what is important, because if you're trying to do 20 things at once, it's probably 18 of them are just going to be a complete waste of time. And that means now, with the moon in Sagittarius, that you need to get a broad picture. You need, whatever you're planning on doing today and tomorrow and the rest of the week, you need to get a perspective on it. Where does it fit in with the wider plan? And that ability to see the wider plan is going to be, I think, crucial for your success, certainly over the next couple of days. Because if you can't see the wider plan and you just focus on the things in front of you, then it might be difficult. But it is actually often very difficult to think of a broader picture. It's like, I'll give you an example from myself. I do these YouTube videos every day, and I spend a lot of time on these YouTube videos. But I spend so long on my YouTube videos that I can't think about the broader picture of the channel and what else I should be doing and what other changes I can make, because I'm so focused on one thing, because all my energy goes into this. So again, it's possible to put your energy into so many little things that you lose the guiding principle. And so that does matter, that you think about what is that guiding principle. And you cannot put a little bit of energy into lots of different things, because in the end it really is not going to work. But that should not take away from the fact, Aries, that things are looking so much better. And if you can put your energy into the right areas, really, the sky's the limit. Taurus, you possibly feel that things do need to slow down just a bit. You absolutely understand that there's a lot happening, and that things are changing quickly. But in terms of your perspective, Taurus, I think you feel that it's just slightly too much, and that you somehow need to slow things down a bit. And that could be hard work, especially at the beginning of the day. There's an opposition between Moon and Uranus. Okay, that opposition between Moon and Uranus may particularly impact you if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia. And that Moon opposition Uranus could represent a time of tension, perhaps when you find the world and other people irritating, they're pushing your boundaries, and you might almost feel a little bit explosive. But it's short-lived. It's not going to last for too long, and I think that you will be able to adopt sort of a more relaxed approach in the end. But the moon does change sign today, and I think, Taurus, that that is going to affect you. And then as the moon moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius, as I've suggested, you are actually going to want to slow down. Now, that might not sound right. Moon in Sagittarius sounds kind of quite a fast position for the moon to be in, but I just think that you're going to perhaps look at things that you were involved with, you were engaged with, and you just become aware that it's not simple, that whatever you do leads on to something else, and it has a complication, and perhaps one complication could lead to another complication, and there may be no end to it. So perhaps, Taurus, you need to keep things simple and not overcommit yourself. And Taurus, if you do find that things are getting too complicated and that you're starting not really to understand what's going on, then maybe the solution to the problem is to just ask questions, even if those questions seem inappropriate, and just be very clear in your questioning. You might feel that other people don't want to know, or you might feel, maybe you'll feel that you're being stupid, but you can't feel stupid asking a question. If you don't know something, the stupid thing is not to ask a question. And so if you ask a question, even if the answer seems obvious, then ask it. And through this openness and just getting right to the point, I think, Taurus, you will actually be able to, move things forward, and you will get the answers you're looking for. People may not like to give you the answers. Maybe they feel you shouldn't be asking these kind of questions, but it doesn't matter. The key thing, Taurus, for you is simplification. Simplification is what it's all about. And by simplifying things, Taurus, you will give yourself just a general understanding of what is happening, and you're going to be making yourself a whole lot happier. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, again, relationships of all kinds, you may find that other people are more active than usual, that they've got more to say, they want to do things. They may in some respects be quite exhausting, and you don't have to follow their lead if you don't want to. But at the same time, you need to accept, perhaps, that people want to do stuff. The people in your life, there are things they want to do. They want to do it now, and I don't think you should hold them back. But at the same time, you shouldn't feel that they have to interfere with your life. If they want to enjoy themselves in a particular way, let them enjoy themselves in a particular way. Well, within reason, of course. You don't want anyone to do anything stupid or dangerous, but by and large, it might be a question of live and let live, and just you and others may just be going in different directions short term. Different interests, different energy levels. Yeah, I think that's a key point. You and others having different energy levels, and that's going to have an impact on the choices you make. But tolerance is going to be very important. Gemini. I suppose, Gemini, the main thing going on today is the conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. Now, this conjunction between Mars and Jupiter, it is exact tomorrow, and I will be talking about the conjunction between Mars and Jupiter tomorrow, but I also need to talk about it today because, there's a crossover from one day to the other. I think that is, the issue you have to remember with these forecasts of the 12 signs. I try to do discrete forecasts for each day for each sign, as if one day is sort of special, and there's a difference between one day and another, but very often there just isn't much of a difference between one day and another. I suppose that's a problem about doing daily forecasts. And this Mars-Jupiter conjunction, which is going to dominate the next few days, I think, is, I believe, going to have quite an impact on you, because it happens in Gemini. And okay, it's going to be particularly important if you're born in if you're, for example, I don't know how you're looking at these 12 signs. That if you're doing it based on your sun sign, then as I understand some of you are, others use the ascendant, maybe a few of you use the moon. But if you're doing it from a perspective of the sun sign, then the people that this Mars-Jupiter conjunction it's most going to affect are those born, I don't know, around the 5th, 6th, 7th of June. Because your sun will be at approximately 16 Gemini, if you know what degree your sun is. If you're looking at the perspective of the ascendant, if you've got Gemini rising, and it's just if your rising sign is right in the middle of Gemini, so if you've got, I don't know, between 15 and 17 Gemini rising, then I think that this Mars-Jupiter aspect is going to have a big impact. But I think it's going to affect all Geminis to some extent. And with Mars-Jupiter conjunction, it is very energetic, and it's the whole way you present yourself. And I think that Geminis are going to want perhaps to present themselves in a somewhat larger than life way. You're not going to want to be ignored. You're here, you're alive, you're real. And Geminis, that is important for many Geminis. Sometimes Geminis can feel that it's all an abstraction, that life is tenuous, that it's not particularly real. I mean, I'm speaking as a Gemini. You remember Jean-Paul Sartre, the existential philosopher, was a Gemini. So had his sun in Gemini. You can end up thinking that life is absurd, but Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini wants to be heard, wants to be recognized, and I think it's okay to demand recognition in terms of just being noticed. And yeah, you've got a lot to say, and you want to have an impact, and it's absolutely okay to have an impact. And at the same time, today we've got the moon moving into Sagittarius, and I think overall that is a good thing. When the moon was in Scorpio, okay, the moon is still going to be in Scorpio for much of the day, perhaps even pretty much all the day if you're in East Asia or Australia or New Zealand. But don't worry, the moon will be in Sagittarius soon enough. But with the moon moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, I think you do feel more alive. You feel less obsessed with petty little details. That you can be more yourself. But at the same time, there is a realization that you have to consider the social world. You have to consider, how events in the world around you are having an impact on you, how other people interact with you. And so it's not a solo journey anymore with the moon moving into Sagittarius. And you might then be somewhat conflicted, because on one hand you really do want attention is going to be important to you, but on the other hand, you need to make some effort to consider other people and their needs, and that may not be the first thing that comes to mind. So when you do something which attracts attention, which gets you noticed. Try to work out exactly what kind of impact you are having on the other person. Is it a fortunate impact? Now, there's no reason why you need to make other people comfortable. Not at all. I mean, as I was, I was walking the dog. Where was I? I was walking dog on Sunday, and I got to be talking to. I was past a church, and a pastor came out, and he wanted to talk to me just before the. I don't know. I've never met him in my life, but he wanted to talk to me, and I asked him what he was going to be preaching about, and I said to him, well, I gave him my opinion that people in America, they just they created God in their own image, and they just wanted to be comfortable, and that was what it's all about. And he agreed with me there. And we talked about this distinction, or at least I started talking about this distinction between comforting the disturbed and disturbing the comfortable, and that's what we're supposed to do. I suppose comforting the disturbed. That's I suppose very important. An important charitable thing to do. But there's also the question of disturbing the comfortable, and that's what I sort of mentioned to the pastor as we were talking. What was he doing? He was going to be talking about Romans and how God can come. As usual, it's something to do with God coming into people's lives. Anyway, he got to meet my dog as well. He seemed to like my dog. I'm rambling, aren't I? Okay, so what I'm saying here with this moon in Sagittarius, it may be necessary for you to disturb the comfortable with what you say. People may be complacent. Yeah, they may even be creating God in their own image. I don't know, but they may be complacent, and they perhaps need to be shaken up. But if you're going to shake someone up, Gemini, you've got to know what you're doing. It shouldn't just be something random. It just must be an absolute intention to make people think. Now, of course, if you happen to be a Gemini pastor, which I don't think Gemini pastors watch these videos, but now might be a good time, if you have interaction with your flock, to say things to shake them up. That's moon in Sagittarius. Get them to think. They might not like what you have to say, but perhaps it's got to be said. And that's further empowered by the fact that the moon in Sagittarius is square Mercury in Virgo. It's about pointing things out that people don't want to hear. Perhaps also pointing things out that you don't want to hear. But, as they say, doesn't the truth set you free? Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Okay. That's all I'm going to say about Gemini. So I think it's a good day, but you need to push things. But if you're going to push things too far, you need to know that you're pushing things too far. Cancer. It's a little bit of a changeover day for you, Cancer. I think that you may take the view that things are not necessarily quite as simple as they used to be. I mean, you, of course, always understand that nothing is entirely simple. That, I suppose, is the nature of being a Cancerian. And it just may feel that perhaps there are things you've missed, or perhaps you just felt you didn't have to worry about something in the past, but now it might be a good idea to look at it again and work out exactly what it's all about. It may be a little bit of, it may be somewhat irritating, and Just because something is irritating Cancer doesn't mean that you shouldn't get involved with it. Because if something has the ability to irritate you, Cancer, then it's going to irritate you whether you look at it or not. It doesn't matter whether you look at a mosquito biting you or not look at it. It's still going to bite. It's still going to irritate you, and you then have to respond accordingly. Yeah, I've heard it said that if a mosquito is biting you, you should never squat it, or you shouldn't kill anything at all, even if it's a mosquito. Isn't that right? But if you're minded to kill a mosquito in the middle of biting you, apparently if you squat it, it can cause some kind of infection. You can drive it into your body, into your skin. Anyway, I seem to be in the mood for talking about stuff which is completely irrelevant today. At least that was what was happening when I was talking to Gemini. But if something is irritating, consider how you're going to respond to it. And the immediate reaction to it is not necessarily the right reaction. You need to give yourself time to pause. What is the appropriate way? Can you just get rid of it without causing any damage, perhaps to the other person or even to yourself? So part of today might be about irritation management, and the key perhaps is about successfully managing irritation, and it's also how you talk about things that are irritating you. Yeah, there are things that are irritating you. How do you bring the subject up? And you just have to remember what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to make things easier for yourself. You're trying to remove an irritation. You're not trying to prove a point. You're not trying to bring someone down. You're not trying to get involved in an argument. That's not what you're trying to do. And probably Cancer, you're going to be most comfortable when there is no real chance of anyone getting in your way. When no one's annoying you. And so perhaps it's a day when you need to carefully create your own environment where other people have minimal impact. I think that actually could be quite important. And on a positive note, I think that Cancerians will have a vision of the way things should be. If you're trying to sort something out, perhaps something that seems to be a bit of a mess, if you're trying to sort something out that is a bit of a mess, one problem is that you just have an issue with the end state. You kind of don't know how it's supposed to look once things are all in place. Well, what does in place mean if you don't know where things are supposed to be placed? So you don't have a clear idea about what the end state actually is. And so you could end up just churning, moving things around, trying to make things look better. If you've got a space here which is cluttered, well, you remove the clutter and you put it somewhere else, but then someone else gets cluttered. So if you're engaged in activities that are about clearance, making things simpler, then just try to get some broad idea about where you're going. Write it down. Draw pictures if necessary, because by doing that, you're going to be able to be useful. And this applies, I suppose, also to physical activity, or to any maybe activities connected, could be dieting, what you're eating, what you're not eating. Perhaps you've got some plan regarding health and fitness, some plan. But again, ask yourself, why are you doing it? That does matter, because sometimes you can just be doing something, maybe because it makes you feel virtuous, but you just keep doing it, but you don't actually know why you're doing it. And perhaps you need to think about it, and perhaps even do some research on it. You know, I remember I went through a phase actually of taking an aspirin every day, because not for any particular reason. I thought I'd read somewhere that if you take an aspirin every day, it reduces your chances of getting a heart attack. And then I read finally I read a scientific article about taking aspirins every day, and I read this scientific article, and I just stopped this habit of. I've been doing it for about 10 years, and I read this article, and I said, no, that is it. And I just had clear statistical evidence that it not just doesn't really work very well, but there are major risks. So I read this article, and that was it. So if you're involved in some kind of routine relating to health and fitness and whatever, you know, ask yourself why you're doing it, and perhaps do some research on it, because you don't want to just do something just for the sake of it, because it's so easy to get involved in a routine and you keep going, and then it may actually be pointless. It could be worse than pointless. Who knows? Leo, you are, I think, today feeling quite a lot better. Better as in the sense of just being more in tune, just in general more comfortable, and feeling that you've finally got something useful to do, and not just useful, but something which very much relates to you and who you are. And it's about finally being able to pursue your own interests in your own way, without having to worry too much about anything else. I mean, that's not to say there aren't going to be some concerns. You might have a few feelings of guilt. There may be a few pressures from outside, being asked, why you're doing what you're doing. Is it really wise, and all that kind of pressure. But I think in most cases, Leo, you can ignore the pressure, or even transform the pressure. So if you feel that anyone is trying to constrain you, Leo, then I think you're actually in a good position to be able to confront whoever is, trying to tell you what to do or tell you what not to do. And perhaps you can explain the situation. Perhaps you can just make it clear that you're not in the mood for change. You're not in the mood for reducing the pace of things. You know what you need to do. And I think that is good. I think it's good that you have a clear sense today of your creative purpose, and it will develop as the day progresses. In some places it may take longer than in other places. It's not until late this evening, perhaps in Australia or New Zealand, when the moon moves into Sagittarius. But it will happen in the end at some stage today. And then I think that you will be in a position of power, and at the same time, you can confront the material details. There's always material details to be worried about. I don't want to overemphasize them, but you might feel that perhaps something has a cost, and your first instinct might be to feel that what you really want to do may cost too much. But of course it doesn't cost too much, because it needn't cost anything at all if you go about it in the right way. And while this is going on, Leo, I think there's going to be a fair amount going on in terms of your social life. From a social perspective, there really is action. And so if you want to meet people, meet your kind of people, not just anybody, people who are on your wavelength. You can get a boost in that way. Remember, Mars is making a conjunction to Jupiter. It's making a conjunction to Jupiter in Gemini, which is a very sociable sign, especially from a Leo perspective. And so, you don't want to restrict your social life or your social scene. Try to be a little bit ambitious and just to meet new people, because I think you can benefit. And people from the past who you might have moved away from for one reason or another, it might be a good time to get back in touch. Though one interesting aspect today is the fact that the Sun, which is the ruler of Leo, is semi-square black moon, true black moon Lilith. And so I think that this semi-square might be about something potentially trying to constrain you. And I would have said that this Sun semi-square black moon Lilith is possibly working at a fairly psychological level. There could be moments of self-doubt today when you feel that the past is trying to hold you back or even bring you down. I don't want to over-dramatize this. What I do is I look at the astrology for today, and I just look at I try as far as I can to look at everything. And some of the things I look at may not be relevant, but I just think it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that the Sun is semi-square black moon Lilith today. And I'm just trying to sort of speculate what that might mean. And so perhaps things from the past could be making themselves felt. Perhaps bad experiences from the past. You may be wanting to do something with great optimism, then suddenly doubts appear from nowhere. And it may be a sense in which you overthink things. But these doubts, I suppose, and these threats, threats is too strong a word. Maybe temptations is a better word. But it just may be perhaps that a couple of people that you're in contact with, it just may be something they say or their attempts to influence you could just remind you of the past. And there just may be a temptation to visit something again which perhaps should not be revisited. And I think it's a time, Leo, when you need to be in the light. You need to walk in the light. You don't want to be walking in the darkness. You don't want to be obsessing about the darkness. It's unnecessary. You don't have to go there. So perhaps in that sense, Leo, it's just important to keep it simple, be active, be optimistic, and just don't allow anyone's negativity to get you down. Virgo, you may feel that you aren't fully able to take advantage of whatever's going on today. Perhaps because you just feel maybe not in the right mood, or perhaps that you've got other priorities, and therefore you seem to be inclined to hold things back. It shouldn't be like that. It needn't be like that. So what it can be about, what it should be about, Virgo, is, by all means, giving yourself security. I mean, security always matters to a Virgo. So sure, give yourself security, but don't give yourself too much security, because if you are 100% secure, you're 100% inactive, and you can't do anything. And so don't allow things to be exaggerated, and don't allow, for example, your home or members of your family to exert too much pressure on you, or to take up too much of your time, because you have got other things to do. And there are opportunities today, which I think, not just today, but over the next few days, which I really do think that you should try to take advantage of. For example, Virgo, we've got Mars making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, that conjunction between Mars and Jupiter is exact tomorrow, but it's pretty close today. And that Mars-Jupiter in Gemini hopefully will be pretty dynamic and exciting, and it will push you forward, and you're going to, I hope, be quite ambitious in whatever way is appropriate. It doesn't have to be about career ambitions. It can just be ambitions in your life and wanting to push yourself on further to sort of realize your full potential, whatever that might be. And that's something that you can put a huge amount of energy into. Now, it's energy, but you shouldn't be scattering. That's always a danger with a Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, of scattering your energy. But you want to, decide what's important, and that's what Virgo can do. Separating the wheat from the chaff, deciding what's important, and then just giving it everything you've got. And in that way, I do think that you can be very effective, and you can give the impression of being a well-organized and focused person who has also got both feet on the ground. And people will appreciate that you've got both feet on the ground. It will be obvious that you have both feet on the ground. And in fact, Virgo, you say that, I've suggested maybe you may be concerned about security concerns, but about your security, and being grounded, but you're just going to find it really quite easy to look after your own interests. If anyone is doing something that is unsettling, you'll be able to point it out straight away. And so, in real time, you can make yourself more secure. And so you don't have to worry too much about the risks, because you know how to, I think in many cases, you just know how to avoid risks anyway, whatever you're doing. So I think, Virgo, it's a time when you can be confident, and you've got to tell yourself that you understand what's going on. You're not going to do anything stupid, but there's no need, Virgo, to be overly cautious. I think that is unnecessary. And finally, I suppose I should say that from a communication point of view, today, probably into tomorrow, you're going to be quite sharp. You'll be able to string your words together very effectively, and they will get an impact. And yeah, that impact could be quite strong. And if anyone's out of order, doing something you don't approve of, or you want to, I suppose, discipline someone verbally, then okay, you'll be able to do it. Yeah, because you are going to be very sharp. You're going to be too sharp, it's possible, but I suppose you're a Virgo, you'll be able to, I think in most cases, get the balance right. Libra. You, I think, are in the mood for a bit of change. Perhaps recently things have been a little bit stuck, and you may have felt that you maybe been concentrating on the wrong things, or on things that were just too trivial, too boring, and you now just want to move on. And you're looking for variety, and I certainly think that variety is available. So if you happen to be bored, that needn't be a permanent state of mind. And if you are able to do a bit of exploring, then it won't be long before you find something really interesting. So, don't hold back, and don't allow yourself to be too cautious. You perhaps start the day being a little bit conflicted. Yeah, you want excitement, but you are feeling cautious, because you don't exactly know what you're going to run into. And so part of you thinks you might as well just focus on safety and not pushing yourself too hard. But I think today and into tomorrow, it's just really important that you give yourself the opportunity to just see what's available, because I think that plenty of things are available. And it may today be a sense, Libra, of just trial and error. You move in one direction, see if it works. Then you move in another direction, see if that works. And you keep moving and you keep changing. And okay, at first you might not find what you're looking for, then you go in another direction. But in the end, through a process of trial and error, you do end up finding what you're looking for. And it perhaps is a time when you mustn't make early commitments, because that's how I suppose this process of trial and error works. You put a little bit of energy into lots of different things, but you don't put huge amounts of energy into one thing at an early stage, because in that way you just end up being stuck. You'd perhaps are denying yourself all sorts of possibilities because you have decided to build your house in the first good spot you found, when in fact there may be better spots available. So perhaps that's what you have to do. Just keep an open mind. Don't just focus on one thing, and be ready to do a lot of exploring, and until you eventually find what you're looking for. And maybe that's it's like, isn't there an Italian wine called Est Est Est? I think that the story went that this wine, that there was some lord, or maybe it was a pope or someone, sent someone on to look for the tavern with the best wine, and to indicate that it was a good wine by putting the label Est, I think that's Latin or for is, on the tavern or the whatever it was where the wine was. But anyway, this whoever was this emissary didn't, or this scout, whoever it was, they didn't just they just kept going. And I think if they found something that was good, they put up S. When they finally found what they were looking for, the absolute best wine, they wrote Est Est Est. At least that's the story the winemakers like to give. So perhaps that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the est, that place that is perfect. And the first tavern you go to may not be the best place. It may be good, may kind of fulfill some of your requirements, but it's not necessarily going to fulfill all of your requirements. So keep looking until you're able to put up that sign, est. And that's basically how you need to go through the day, I think. And just don't be satisfied with second best. And also, at the same time as all this, you're going to find that some of the people that you have to deal with, not have to deal with, some of them you like dealing with, maybe have to deal with them all the time, have more energy than usual at their disposal. And you yourself have a fair amount of energy, but some other people have even more energy. And this is, today and tomorrow, when you've got Mars making a conjunction to Jupiter, and because Mars is often connected with other people, certainly for Librans. And so with Mars conjunct Jupiter, it may be that other people not just have a lot of energy, but they're able to push you, and they're able to sort of push you in new directions. It's not just about you looking for new horizons, new adventures. It's about other people looking for new adventures too. And other people are going to, not everyone, but the people that matter are going to be pretty active. Now, they may be too active. They may be too active for their own good. And so you have to decide whether you can handle it all. But if you do spend time with another person, you may be impressed by how much energy they've got. And some of this energy may be focused on not just on adventure and exploration, but it may be focused on ideas and on broader principles and philosophies. I think that is entirely possible. And we are living in a very politicized world, and so Mars conjunct Jupiter may actually represent a person or people who have very, very strong opinions, and they are convinced that they're right. But when you've got people with very, very strong opinions, you might be tempted to think that they are absolutely set in their ways. But strangely, people with the strongest opinions can change their mind very, very quickly, surprisingly quickly. And this may make you wonder, why do people have opinions? What are they all about? There's the kettle going. And so what are these strong opinions really all about? And if you sort of scratch the surface, you might realize that what people are actually looking for is excitement and variety. And the strongest held opinions, maybe politically, maybe religiously as well, can, in the right circumstances, be changed into something completely different. So if you come across people who seem absolutely doctrinaire and dogmatic, don't be fooled. There is always a circumstance in which someone can change their mind. Scorpio. You're feeling that you don't want to push yourself too far, but you kind of know you have to. And so there may be a sense today that that you're feeling a little bit reluctant about everything. You don't fully understand what's happening. And I think that is because the moon, it's been in Scorpio for a couple of days, and the moon is now moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. And that is an important sign change. You've had the moon in your sign. You have broadly understood what was happening, the way things were going. But now with the moon moving into Sagittarius, you're aware of the way things are changing, and you don't feel entirely confident. And just before the moon moves out of Scorpio, it does make this opposition to Uranus. And this moon opposition Uranus, okay, it's going to be more important if you're in Asia than perhaps in Europe and the Americas. But I think all of us, to some extent, will feel this moon opposition Uranus. At least Scorpios will feel this moon opposition Uranus. And this moon opposition Uranus does remind you perhaps of how important you are, how important it is to get your way, how you want to get your way, and how you want things to be uncomplicated. And you don't want to have complications imposed upon you by other people. That still, the complications are there, and you do understand how erratic other people can be. And somehow it's just kind of a good idea if you were to keep your cool. And then the moon moves into Sagittarius, and okay, the moon moves away from the opposition to Uranus. That's a good thing. But at the same time, the moon is out of Scorpio, so you feel less certain. But as you feel less certain, you can also feel that the pace is hotting up. And it's the world in which you live, and you're perhaps not particularly comfortable about the pace hotting up. Now, you might say to yourself that if things are just too active, if there's too much going on, that in some ways you can just withdraw from it all. But the trouble is, if you withdraw from it all, you might still find that you're carried on the tide. That doesn't mean that you're able to fully withdraw from all the influences around you. And in fact, by withdrawing from it all, you might actually have less power and less control. So perhaps you should accept the situation and accept that you're being called on to use your power and make things happen in your own way. And I think that you're going to be helped by the fact that there is a conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. Mars is, of course, your ruler, and it's conjunct Jupiter. This Mars-Jupiter conjunction sort of dominates today and tomorrow. And so with Mars conjunct Jupiter, Scorpio, you are actually able to really use your power and throw a lot of energy into the things that you regard as being important. And, once you start putting energy into something, it can be a bit of a chain reaction. One thing leads to another, another, and another. And in the end, things can go critical. And, when Scorpio goes critical, yeah, that might be a good thing. You go critical, that means everything comes together and you can really explode into life. And you will then be really hard to ignore. But I suppose it's also about harnessing your energy. I suppose it's like nuclear power. Nuclear power has to be harnessed. Scorpio has to be harnessed. You have to harness your own energy and decide where you want to put this energy. And I think you have an idea, and it doesn't mean that you have to have a direct and massive impact on everyone around you. It doesn't mean the neighborhood has to be flattened. No, you can focus it on the things that are important to you, and only you know what's important to you. And so that's something you need to focus on, this Mars conjunct Jupiter, over the next day or two. It's It's very powerful, and it's a power that I think you have to use responsibly and constructively, but also it's a power that you shouldn't be afraid of. Sagittarius. It's nice, Sagittarius, that the moon is moving into your sign. And with the moon moving into your sign, I think you're starting to feel good about yourself, and perhaps some of the sort of pessimism and negativity of the past is starting to fade away, and you're getting a sense of who you are and what you can do. And when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto, and that moon sextile Pluto just gives you the ability to assert yourself in a clear but quite gentle way. It's quite obvious who you are and what you want to do, and I don't think Sagittarius, anyone's going to seriously contradict you and try to stop you doing whatever you feel that you want to do. And while this is happening, Mars is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, this Mars-Jupiter conjunction, it is exact tomorrow, but I think it's still pretty strong today. In fact, it's very strong today, this Mars conjunct Jupiter. So it's certainly energizing. I mean, Mars is an energy planet. It's conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter kind of represents you. And so you do have a lot of energy, but we shouldn't forget that Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter doesn't always work particularly well in Gemini. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, but so it's in Gemini, so it's in its detriment. So there's some danger here with Jupiter in Gemini, being that you have all of this energy at your disposal, but you don't actually know how to use it, and the energy goes all over the place, and you just waste a lot of time just putting your energy into just simply the wrong things, and you just don't have much in the way of focus. Now, that's not an inevitability. You can contain this thing. You can have focus, but it may not. It may require some preparation. And you have to consider all of the sort of the pressures around you. I think maybe that in spite of your attempts to be independent-minded, you may be over-influenced by what other people are saying and what are suggesting, and what they're suggesting. So they said, hey, you need to do this and that and this and that and all of this kind of stuff. And you might just end up very confused and try to put your energy into everything, and in the end get nowhere, or even worse than nowhere. So Sagittarius, it's very important that you have a sense of your own strengths and ask yourself, what is Sagittarius all about? And Sagittarius as a sign is all about seeing things from a broad perspective, seeing that something that seems really important when you're close up, when you step back, you start to put it in perspective. When you see perspective, when you use your Sagittarian intuition to just understand the subtle connections between things, and also just to intuitively understand the future. You intuitively understand the future, and because you intuitively understand the future, you understand where you should be putting your energies, and you might then realize that there's one thing that really matters, that right now it doesn't matter what other people are saying, what other people are suggesting, because Sagittarius, you know the real answer. You know the single answer. And because you know the single answer, then you are able to decide what matters, and then you can take this Mars-Jupiter conjunction and you can really use it to achieve whatever needs to be achieved. And only you know what needs to be achieved. You certainly can't be told. I mean, I know people are going to try to tell you today. And in fact, Sagittarius, half of you might be half inclined to listen to what people say and to think that their view of the world is in some way better than yours. But of course, that's not true, because you, Sagittarius, are the only person that sees the full picture. Now, all of that sounds rather pie in the sky and a bit flowery, maybe, or perhaps just vague, but there are other things going on, perhaps related things going on, if appropriate. Now, one aspect that we're getting today is a square between Moon and Mercury, and I think that this square between Moon and Mercury is actually quite useful. Moon and Mercury is about understanding, and it's also about understanding the things that are important, not just in some broad inspirational sense, but things that are important in actually quite a material way. And I think that you're going to be very good at prioritizing, again, over things which may just be apparently very routine, but nonetheless have their own importance. And if you're in any position of control, where people are looking up to you for advice or suggestions, you'll be very good at articulating yourself, and you'll be able to articulate what matters, what doesn't matter, and people will just listen to you, and you will, in your own way. I think you're actually going to be quite a good manager today. I don't necessarily mean manager in any professional or business sense, just whatever you're managing. If you're managing anything and you're managing other people, I mean, you could be managing your family, you could be managing your friends, whatever you're managing today, Sagittarius, I think you're going to manage it extremely well. Capricorn, you probably, or possibly at least, might want to sit today out. You may be of a view that, sure, there's a lot going on, but do you need to actually get involved with it? And at the same time, you may have your own priorities which don't require any action or assertion on your part. You can just quietly get on with the things that matter to you, and really might be said, the less said about it, the better. I think Capricorn, if you talk too much about your own plans and your ideas, then the conversation may not go anywhere particularly meaningful. And Capricorns hate just talking for the sake of it. They don't like that at all. And yeah, there could be a lot of talking if you're not careful. If you get involved, once you start getting involved in a conversation, once you start getting involved in a phone call, it might just go on, and you just might feel that there's something better for you to be doing, and possibly the best thing for you to be doing right now is to be doing things in your own terms, on your own terms, without really getting much attention. I mean, you don't want any attention today. That's something you absolutely don't want and you don't need. And you don't actually want to do anything which which might draw attention to yourself, because it might just draw comment, and you don't want comment, because comment is just a waste of time. So you could say, well, let the world do its thing, let the world run its course, but you've got your world and you've got things you want to do, and that's absolutely the way it should be. And I think that Capricorn, there are certain things which probably mustn't be discussed. There might be a temptation to discuss them, perhaps because you just feel, well, it's kind of the right thing to do. You don't want to do it, but maybe you should. But if you're wondering whether to talk about something, whether to bring a subject up, I would have said in most cases the answer is no. So, for example, there might be an issue that you don't fully understand. It's an issue that you don't really want to talk about, but you don't fully understand it. So you might think, well, it just might be better to talk to someone about it, get some feedback. But in reality, if you were to work on it yourself, you would almost certainly find the solutions you're looking for on your own, and so you get the satisfaction of finding the answers, and at the same time you haven't had to reveal anything. You've been able to keep everything secret, and really that's the way it should be. So overall, Capricorn, I'm not really saying much about your sign. It's a day possibly when you actually have quite a lot of freedom. You don't have to submit to anyone's pressure. You don't have to do things other people's way. You can make choices about how you want to use today, and I think you can use today, in your own way, at your own pace, and I think the less you have to say, the less you have to explain, the better you'll feel. Aquarius. It's a day, Aquarius, when you probably feel that you're pretty creative at the moment. I mean, you've been creative for some time. You are, of course, you're creative all the time. We're all creative all the time, but you have your own creativity, which I think has become a particular issue and particular focus. There's been a lot of focus on it since the end of May, and at the moment we've got a conjunction between Mars and Jupiter, and this conjunction between Mars and Jupiter, I think it does really focus on what you're good at, because there are several things that you're really good at. Maybe, in fact, there are two things you're really good at. I mean, I know you're good at lots of things, but at the moment, it just may be two things you're good at. That's Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, that really do need a lot of your attention. And it's a time when you should be really putting everything you've got into it, because that does matter, and you've got to be really as positive and optimistic as possible. You shouldn't believe that anything is impossible, and self-belief and just a fundamental faith that you've got it all right, Aquarius. I think that is going to be really important. And we've got the moon moving into Sagittarius today, and I think that it could be late today, but at some stage today the moon moves into Sagittarius. So with the moon moving into Sagittarius, I think this is a time when when Aquarius, you can really be appreciated. So the moon in Sagittarius does allow you to get favorable attention. And once you start getting favorable attention, you're in a position to really start to use the situation, because the moon doesn't just move into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto as it moves into Sagittarius. And of course, Pluto is in your sign. So with Pluto sextile, with moon sextile Pluto, you can be in your own way the center of attention. And when you've got people around you, it will be obvious that you are clever and talented, and also in your own way quite influential. Yeah, you can be influential. And I suppose, perhaps recently you've had an insight. Perhaps you've got a couple of insights today, or perhaps particularly early today, that you may have had some powerful insights about where things should be going, how you want to arrange things. These insights may have just come from nowhere, but now you're ready to perhaps put these insights into action. So there shouldn't be much to limit you, except perhaps there are a few questions there are a few internal questions that you're asking yourself. You are asking yourself whether this is absolutely right, whether you can actually move as fast as you really would like to move. Yeah, you'd like to move at a fast pace. You'd like to enjoy other people's company and benefit from other people's company and let other people benefit from your company. You'd like all of that, and that's the way it should be. But there may just be a few doubts as the moon moves into Sagittarius, just thinking maybe there's just this complication or this issue that hasn't been sorted out, and that until it's been sorted out, then we have to stay where we are. Just some Aquarians might have that feeling, and I think it's just important for you to accept that nothing can be perfect. There are always going to be doubts, and with people there are always going to be doubts. There's always going to be an issue of trust. No one can be 100% trusted except you yourself, and you can't expect total trust. There's always going to be a possibility that someone might do something unexpected, and that happens. But you can't let it slow you down or even grind you to a halt. You have to move forward. And I suppose if you do have doubts, if there's something that appears to be holding you back, then I suppose the answer is just to be honest about your doubts and be direct. So if you do not 100% trust someone, then perhaps you need to tell them that you don't 100% trust them. Okay, you can moderate the language, but you can perhaps ask them some questions. Ask them to address your doubts. Just be quite clear about it. Be blunt. And I think that if you are honest and open in what you say to another person, or perhaps an organization, something, whatever you're worried about, wherever your doubts lie, if you're honest and open, then I think in most cases you're going to get an open and honest reply back. And so it's not a time for questions and doubts to be hanging in the air. The questions and doubts have to be addressed, and if there needs to be a confrontation, then so be it. But I don't think it's going to be a serious confrontation. It's just going to be asking a question, getting a response, and in that answer that someone gives, you'll be able to see the full picture. You will understand. Pisces, you are feeling that things really are starting to move. I'm not saying that you entirely want things to move. I think at some level, Pisceans would like things to stay the same. Let's just stay in this one place, enjoy this one place, and let's not make things too difficult for ourselves. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, I don't think it's unfortunately. I think it's good that things are moving, but nothing stays the same, and you have to accept that, and you have to go with the flow. You have to go with the tide, and you are being challenged. I do think you're being challenged. Not just today, but tomorrow as well. I mean, you're being challenged by the fact that Mars is conjunct Jupiter. That is a very challenging conjunction if you're a Pisces, because Jupiter is ruler of your sign. It's not Neptune. I keep saying that, but I know that there are some people that think that Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. I mean, Neptune certainly has an association with Pisces. That is true. And Neptune is in Pisces, but the actual traditional ruler of Pisces is Jupiter, and Mars is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and that must surely have an impact on you. And so it is about a challenge. You perhaps have thought that you'd got everything straight, that you've understood things, that you can perhaps stay in one philosophical place, but Mars is telling you no. This is not entirely satisfactory. You do have to move on. This is not somewhere you can stay forever, and your first reaction might be quite negative, and you might resent it that people and circumstances are moving you on. You might get annoyed. You might try to stay where you are. But I think you need to accept the situation, and it's better to respond sooner rather than later. Because if you resist what is happening, if you resist the pressure is just going to get stronger, and it's not going to have a satisfactory outcome. So try to understand what the challenge is about. And this challenge may be about your home and your family. It's the kind of pressures that perhaps members of your family are putting on you. Maybe you're doing things in your home which they're okay up to a point, but your approach does need to be changed, and you're being told that things need to change. So that is a possibility. Though I don't want to just entirely claim that it's all about you having to change, you having to make adjustments. It may be, certainly in terms of dealing with your family, there may be a family member who is being a problem, and that family member will be represented by Mars conjunct Jupiter. So Mars would be someone who is sort of quite assertive. They might, certainly at the moment, be in a bit of a bad mood, be a bit angry. And this is the kind of person that you can't get away from them because they're a member of your family, but you have to find some way of negotiating with them, understanding them, and working out what needs to change and who needs to change. But Pisces, you don't want to spend all your time worrying about your family and your home. There are other things of interest. You've got your own ambitions. There are things you want to achieve, and it's very important for you to achieve at the moment. And I have an open mind about what achievement means. It depends on who you are, what achievement means. Achievement may be about something you're doing of an inspirational and creative nature. It might be of a social nature, might be to do with business or career. It depends on your circumstance, but it's all about achieving something. And I think you have to consider perhaps what is perhaps holding you back. And I suppose you may feel that something is holding you back, and it's just something that needs to be discussed, or you need to think it through. And it may be something in your head that's holding you back, something you need to work out. It may be a person that's holding you back, but the way forward is discussion and talking. This is actually a theme for a lot of the signs that I've been going through. It's not really a time for anyone to be keeping pressing issues on ice. Pressing issues need to be brought out into the open. If there's any conflict, any simmering conflict in particular, simmering disagreements, they're holding things back. And it's not a time for things to simmer. Moon is in Sagittarius. It's a very open sign, Moon in Sagittarius. So if something's holding you back, if there's some reason why you think you're not achieving your ambitions, you need to confront those reasons, whether those reasons are in terms of your own psychology or that in terms of other people's behavior. It all needs to be confronted, and you need to have a good discussion, whether that discussion is with yourself or whether it's with another person. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at today from the view of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 11, peace. This is one of the best hexagrams in the book. You can see that everything is in the right place. It's a very balanced hexagram. It's not top heavy. You've got the unbroken lines at the bottom. You've got the broken lines at the top. So that sort of balances each other out. There's a sort of sense of sort of heaven on earth feeling with peace. And it's about, things are moving, and the great is arriving, the small is departing, and we're feeling at one with ourselves. And we just feeling that things really are moving. And so I think that we're going to start the day feeling, quite self-contained, but at the same time feeling that we're on the right path. And everything is in the right place. Everything is moving. Now, there is something strange about this particular hexagram. I don't say strange, but perhaps a little bit unusual. And in terms of moving lines, the bottom line moves. The second from the bottom line moves. And the third line moves. So we've got those bottom three lines, the bottom unbroken lines, they all break. And so we do have to consider what this means and what this run-up actually means. And so that bottom line moving in general is pretty fortunate. The bottom line suggests that we are making good progress, even if to begin with we're coming from a pretty low place. It's the bottom line. Things are happening, things are starting to move, and at the same time we are attracting people who are on our wavelength, who have the same priorities as us. And so that really helps us move things on. There is this just natural flow, and one thing moves to another, onto another. Even if we're on our own, things are still moving. We've got everything right. Everything is correctly placed, and so there is this starting position of just harmony, just things starting to move. Then the second line moves, and with the second line moves, this is going to be particularly important if it's a social situation, and the social situation is not quite so fortunate now. There's a certain tendency for people to have their own opinions, and the concept of general unity of purpose may be hard to maintain, because you're going to have different people have their own interests, and you might have to start to question what is someone's agenda. And I think people with different agendas could start to spoil the peace. I suppose it's really difficult to find people who are totally unselfish. They're not motivated by personal gain, or not motivated by their own particular philosophy of the world. They find it, they have this underlying prejudice, whether it's selfish or whether it's to do with their philosophy. And so that is something you have to start to be aware of. So it's starting to get a little bit complicated, but there is no need to panic. And I think if we ourselves do the right thing, regardless of whatever other people are doing, if we do the right thing, if we almost say, yeah, we accept that other people have their own interests, we try as hard as possible to move beyond these interests, but if we ourselves do what is right, then it does seem that we will get recognition and support, and then so it's not so bad. Then we move to the third line, and by the time you move to the third line, this hexagram is about peace. It's about things that are things that is moving, and it seems to be a time overall, in spite of this factionalism, people having their own agendas. In spite of that, there's still a sense of which things are moving in the right direction. But perhaps we have an awareness here that nothing lasts forever. So if we're at a time where everyone is comfortable, is relaxed, where things seem to be moving in the same direction, night follows day. Nothing lasts forever. And maybe this reflects what's happening astrologically. Beginning of the week, not so bad. I was talking about the heliocentric Venus trine Jupiter, which is good, but that's going to create a certain sense of harmony. By the end of the week, we've got Mars square Saturn. So nothing lasts forever. And I think that we just have this awareness, I think, that nothing lasts forever. But we ourselves shouldn't be too worried about this, because it is just part of the natural cycle. And if we are well behaved and we do what is right and we respect authority. When I say respect authority, I'm not talking about respecting authority necessarily in terms of the government. Respecting the authority, maybe the authority in your family, if you're if you're working, or if you're, I don't know, if you're doing work for someone, whatever that authority is. May be inappropriate. Maybe there's no authority that you recognize. But if there is any kind of authority that you recognize and respect, it's not just enough to recognize authority, but you have to respect authority. But if there is an authority that you respect and you carry on respecting that authority, then that will allow you to sort of ride any storm that there might be. But this doesn't take away from the fact that overall 11 peace there is a sense that things are moving, and okay, things are good. Okay, they might not be good forever, but nothing lasts forever. Anyway, because we got 3 lines moving, bottom line, top, second from the bottom, and the third from the bottom, that means we move to a hexagram where all the lines are broken, and we move to hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. And the advice here is not to take action, because hexagram 1 is the creative, hexagram 2 is the receptive. And in a way, this kind of contradicts what I said with the astrology, because with the astrology, I put a lot of emphasis on the Mars-Jupiter conjunction. So the Mars-Jupiter conjunction is very much about action, and there's a lot of energy available. And I was suggesting maybe that's what we need to do, or we need to start preparing to do. But the receptive is saying, maybe not. It's not a time to be imposing our will on things. It's not a time to be thinking we know all the answers. Instead, it's a time to work out what's going on. It's a time to respond, not to act. We need to we need to kind of go with the flow. And if we try to initiate anything today, that would be inappropriate. It's not a time to initiate things. And the reason it's not a time to initiate things, perhaps, is because we don't have the full picture. We don't know. It's a time where we have to actually try to understand what's going on, be receptive to what is going on. And yeah, it does seem that things are changing. I think that was indicated in the third line from the bottom in the previous hexagram, which was 11 piece. Things are changing. The world is changing. The good times don't last forever. We need to be receptive to this changeover. And it's just too early to say, well, this is where we stand. We have to wait, and we have to go with the flow. And at a later stage, when the picture is clearer, then perhaps we can be more assertive. But today, I don't think that is the right approach. Okay, that's all I want to say about the I Ching. And now I want to consider phase angles. So this is a technique that one might use to predict elections. It's just one technique. I'm not saying in itself it's going to give any answers. So let me explain what this actually is and what it means and how one might use it, and just using some examples mainly of presidential elections. But I wanted to start with an old favourite, and that is Adolf Hitler. So here is Adolf Hitler's chart. Make it a bit smaller. So if you look at Adolf Hitler's chart, he has got the sun here, and he's got the midheaven here. And so what we're doing here is we are taking 2 points, and we're asking, what is the angle between those 2 points? So his sun and his midheaven are approximately 94 degrees apart. And every day, there'll be a time in a day when, well, at least when he was alive, when his sun and his midheaven were 94 degrees apart. And using this approach, we set up a chart. We could set up a chart every day for when the sun and the midheaven were 94 degrees apart. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the day he became Chancellor of Germany. So just a couple of points about his chart, or at least one big point about his chart. It's often forgotten with Hitler that he had a Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Pretty close Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Now, it may have been in Capricorn, but Jupiter's fallen in Capricorn. The moon is in its detriment in Capricorn. So in one sense, it's not a particularly good conjunction with Moon Jupiter. Or maybe Moon Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn is good for evil things. That's one interpretation of it. It's mean-spirited, perhaps. Apologies if you've got Moon or Jupiter in Capricorn. So we would then set up a chart for the moment when the Sun and the midheaven were exactly at 94 degrees apart. Now, I set up the chart for the place of birth, not where you are at the time. So if we're talking about Hitler, I'm setting this chart up for Braunau in the Inn, not for Berlin. Now, you can argue with that, but with my solar returns, lunar returns, I always use that. I use the place of birth. I use the place of birth, not the place of where one is at the time. As said, you can argue with that. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying it's the way I just do it. And so if you look at if we can set up Hitler's phase angle return for the day before he became Chancellor. So he became Chancellor on January the 30th, 1933 at 11, I think around 11 in the morning. So I've gone to the evening before. So here is the phase angle return for Hitler. Now, on the surface of it, it's not particularly interesting. Chiron is exactly square the ascendant. Maybe this puts Chiron in a new light. Chiron is in a high-profile position. This is not about rejection. It's about him effectively becoming Chancellor of Germany, and he's immediately becoming a dictator. But there's also, remember, he's got that Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn. So at this time, there was a Moon opposition Jupiter on the evening before. So the Moon, Jupiter, but again, you might say, well, so what? Moon-Jupiter conjunction. It's not on the surface, as I said, it's not on the surface a great chart. But if you look at the midpoints of this chart, let's just make this bigger so you can see the midpoints. At the time of that phase angle return, when the Sun and the midheaven returned to being 94 degrees apart, there was that Moon opposition Jupiter, but the Sun was exactly zero orb, no orb whatsoever. It was exactly semi-square sesquiquadrate Jupiter. Now, that is impressive, and I think that might have something to do with why that day was so important. So if you look at this chart, remember, you can see Sun, midheaven, 94 degrees apart. There's the Moon-Jupiter opposition, and there is the Sun exactly semi-square sesquiquadrate, semi-square or sesquiquadrate. It's making a 45 degree series aspect exactly to the Moon-Jupiter midpoint. But that's Hitler. I didn't really want to talk too much about Hitler, and I wanted to talk about presidential elections. And so the thing about the phase angle return is that you can compare the charts of two people on election day, two presidential candidates, and in theory, you can ask yourself, which chart is better? So let's consider the 1960 election. So the 1960 election was between Nixon and Kennedy. And here is Richard Nixon's phase angle return for November the 8th, 1960. This would have been the evening of the evening of the return. Okay, in theory, you could have taken the day, but this would be the evening of the election, I suppose, as the results were coming in. You could have taken the day before. The chart would have been kind of the same, except the moon would have been a bit earlier. I mean, I don't want to sort of agonize about which one I should use at the same time. The chart is not going to be that different. But You might say, well, you've got Black Moon Lilith quite close to the ascendant. That isn't particularly great. The moon conjunct Mars. I mean, the moon is in Cancer, and you've got Cancer rising, which is perhaps quite nice. Having the moon in the same sign as the ascendant can certainly help with phase angle returns, but maybe it's just too far into the 12th house to have a real impact. So that's and also look at Saturn here. Saturn is square the midheaven. So in that phase angle return for November the 8th, 1960, I don't think it's great. Now let's compare that with the phase angle return for Kennedy on 1960. So for Kennedy, for 1960, this has happened around the afternoon of the election. Jupiter is exactly on the midheaven. The midheaven was at 220 Capricorn, and Jupiter was at 230 Capricorn. So that Jupiter on the midheaven, I would have said, is, even though it's fallen in Capricorn, it's still Jupiter. It's Jupiter in Capricorn on the midheaven, and I think that is perhaps a sign of electoral success. Even Saturn in the 10th house as well. So I think you can say that Kennedy's phase angle return, the Sun midheaven phase angle return, is more powerful for Nixon, and indeed it was Kennedy who won the election. So let's jump 16 years to the 1976 election between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. So here's the Gerald Ford's phase angle return for the election. Just after midnight, November the 2nd, 1976, was when this phase angle return was taken for. I took it for his place of birth, Omaha, Nebraska. And on that day of the election, there was a Mars-Saturn square. So both Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter would have had Mars-Saturn squares in their chart. Now, in Gerald Ford's case, Saturn is in Leo, in its detriment, close to the ascendant. That's not great. I mean, all things being equal, not great. And there's Mars at 16 Scorpio, Saturn at 16 Scorpio, 16 Leo. So that would seem to be a really difficult phase angle return. So Jimmy Carter is going to have the same problem with Mars-Saturn square, but the angles are going to be different. So if we look at Jimmy Carter's phase angle return for 1976, he doesn't have Saturn in the first. He has Mars in Scorpio, relatively close to the ascendant. Mars rules Scorpio. So that is perhaps more fortunate than having Mars in Scorpio in its own sign on the close to the ascendant, is more fortunate from having Saturn in Leo in its detriment close to the ascendant. So I think you can say that Jimmy Carter had a better phase angle return than Gerald Ford, and indeed Jimmy Carter won that election. Let's now look at the Donald Trump series of elections. And the first series, the 2016 series, was obviously Trump was up against Hillary. So here is Hillary's chart for November the 8th. So I've set this for the evening of November the 8th, as the results were coming in, starting to come in. And I'm not saying it's a bad chart. The moon is on the midheaven. That might be a sign of leadership, becoming elected to be president. Even Venus in Sagittarius on the 7th. Venus, planet of women, the female candidate. It's not necessarily so bad, although Venus is on the descendant, which is about the rival, the opponent, perhaps. And so, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, that chart, but you have to compare it with Trump's 2016 phase angle return. Did Trump have a better or a worse phase angle return? So here is Trump's phase angle return for that day, November the 8th, 2016. The thing is, this is a fantastic chart, absolutely fantastic. Venus was exactly on the ascendant. Venus was in mutual reception to Jupiter. Now, Venus was in Sagittarius, sign of Jupiter. Jupiter was in Libra, the sign of Venus, in mutual reception. So Hillary also had Venus mutual reception Jupiter in her phase angle return. But in Trump's case, Jupiter was angular on the midheaven. Venus was on the ascendant. Ascendant ruler in mutual reception with a midheaven ruler. Absolutely fantastic. And I think you perhaps could have predicted a Trump victory based just on that chart because it was so good. Yeah, we also had Uranus on the IC. Okay, drama, turmoil. On its own, I think with Uranus on its IC is possibly not particularly fortunate. But when you look at the overall chart, I think it is actually quite a fantastic thing, that chart. And I think that helps explain how he won. Now let's move to 2020, when Trump was again the candidate, but this time he was up against Joe Biden. So here is Joe Biden's phase angle return for November the 3rd, 2020. And it's not a spectacular chart, but in Joe Biden's case, 21 Scorpio rising, Jupiter is sextile the ascendant, Pluto is sextile the ascendant, Saturn, well, not exactly sextile, but there was this, Jupiter was exactly sextile the ascendant. And I think that on its own suggests that it was pretty good. I mean, that's a sign that perhaps of success, but it would, of course, depend on whether this was a better chart than Donald's phase angle return. So here is Donald's phase angle return for 2020, and for the morning of the hold on, have I got the right one? That's 2020. Well, let me just make sure that. Sorry, the election for 2020 was November the 3rd. So hold on, let me just reset that for November the 3rd. Sorry about that. Let's get the election day right. So yeah, so that's Donald's phase angle return for November the 3rd, 2020, and there are problems here. Mars is on the IC. Mars might be on Aries on the IC. Might be. That is disruptive. On the other hand, he's got Venus on the midheaven, which is not so bad. But I think what kills the chart is the South Node. The South Node right on the ascendant. And the South Node, I often see the South Node as being about reputation. It's just bad reputation. It's reputationally is not a great chart. Now, I understand you can argue with this. You could say, well, Venus and Mars were on the midheaven. Maybe that would have been useful. But I think, again, looking at the overall chart, I don't think that Venus on the midheaven could be helpful in Libra, but I'm not convinced that Mars on the IC in Aries spoils it. And having South Node on the ascendant really does spoil it, I would have said. Now let's finish with the 2024 election. Now, the 2024 election, obviously between what we think it's going to be between Kamala and Donald. I mean, who knows? Maybe the Republicans will perhaps the Democrats will if Kamala is doing really badly in the polls in a month's time, they might decide to switch her out and find someone else. You never know; can happen. But let's start with Kamala. So here is her phase angle return for. Well, this is the evening before the election. So the election was November the 4th, 2024, and you could go for the November the 5th one, which would be the results. The November the 4th chart is probably better than the November the 5th chart, because the November the 5th chart has Moon not exactly on a descendant, but I just want to put her in the best possible light here. So Moon conjunct Venus is nice in this chart. It's in the sixth house, though. One wonders if it's really able to really do anything here in the sixth house. Moon does rule the ascendant. Moon is, I suppose it's going to a square of Neptune, but of course it will be going to the square of Neptune with Trump as well. And so that's her chart. Saturn is maybe uncomfortably close to the midheaven. Now, you could say Saturn conjunct the midheaven is about leadership and rulership, and about becoming president. You could say that. I'm not saying that is wrong to say that, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily an entirely bad chart. It's not so bad. This is a matter of interpretation here, but. So if you're, if you think that Kamala is going to win, then you might want to look at that chart, and you might see Saturn on the midheaven as being a positive. You might see Moon conjunct Venus as being a positive. But likewise, you could see Saturn on the midheaven as perhaps being a problem. Then you have Trump's 2024 chart. Now, before I show you the 2024 chart, you have to remember that Venus has an 8-year cycle. So when I wrote a book on astrology, it was published ages ago. It's been out of print for decades. In 1994, this is before people had access to computers. And at the back of the book, I had tables telling you how to read off the signs of your planets. Not the degree, but the signs. And I utilize the fact that Venus has an 8-year cycle. So every 8 years, if you have an ephemeris, every 8 years, Venus is in exactly the same place. So on January the 1st, 2000, Venus will be in exactly the same place pretty much as January the 1st, 2008. And so with this election, we've got, for Trump, we've got the 8-year cycle is coming into force. So remember, 2016, Trump had Venus exactly on the ascendant. Venus was at remember, for the Trump 2016 election, Venus was at 2542 Sagittarius. So going to Trump for the 2024 election, Venus is at 23 Sagittarius. So as 8 years ago, like 8 years ago, same thing 8 years ago, Venus is also conjunct the ascendant. And so this 8-year cycle has come in, and it's quite rare. It's very rare. It's only happened once before, where you had a president skipping a term and then coming back in. Obviously, I can't remember, at the end of the 19th century. So I think that is potentially quite a powerful signature of success, that Venus conjunct the ascendant, but it's not as strong as 2016. It's not like Venus is in mutual reception to Jupiter or anything. Venus is peregrine. It doesn't have any dignity. But I think overall the Trump phase angle return is probably more fortunate than the Kamala Harris one. But I'm not saying there's a huge difference. I'm not saying that it's not like 2016. I'm not saying that one could call the result of the election just based on these phase angle returns, but it's just something to consider. Anyway, I thought I would just introduce this technique to you. If you're interested in the election results, when you've got two people who are opposed to one another, I suppose it could be a boxing match or a chess or a chess match, or any time when you've got two people who are, I mean, it could be more, I suppose. You could look at a horse race, and you could, if you had the time charts of all the jockeys, you could do this. But it just may be an approach of comparing two people, and you might find it useful. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found that video interesting. If you did find this video interesting, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, of course, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.